This guest brings these presidential letters. These letters were written to him by his good friend Bill, long before he became president. That man was Bill Clinton. These are some of the numerous letters shared between them.
This is sort of a general letter. He's just talking about the elections, the details.
These letters show the sentimental side of the young Clinton.
But there was one paragraph in this.
Yes, toward the end of the letter, he says he's been playing rugby a lot, and I've got a cut over my eye, and he said maybe it'll be enough to keep me out of the draft, and he says wishful thinking.
Boy, I imagine that he'd be happy not to have had that letter come out when he was running for president.
He also sends a flyer he got from an anti-war rally. In the flyer, he writes about his disconnect with the practices there.
So he's very much criticizing the speaker here and saying basically the same bull that's going on there is going on in Arkansas.
That's right.
These are very lovely letters to have.
So this is a nice long letter, handwritten, lends insight into his character, his personality. It's signed Bill because you were a friend, so he's not going to sign it William Jefferson Clinton.
Right. These letters are valued at about...
I would say that note is probably a minimum retail value of $2,000 to $3,000. I would say easily retail this is a $10,000 letter, easily.
Believed to be James Madison's seal, this guest brings this item that has been in their family for over 100 years. The appraiser is skeptical of its authenticity.
When you said it's James Madison's seal, I was really skeptical. It does have the initials JM on the seal.
Also attached is his motto.
And Madison's personal motto is Veritas non verba magistri. Truth, not the word of teachers.
Research into the origin of the seal reveals an interesting story. In September 1828, James Madison wrote a letter to his friend James Barber, who was in London at the time, to help him order a seal that would contain his initials and motto. It is made of rolled gold, which is brass plated with gold. There's a bit of a condition issue on it, as there is a crack on it. This lovely piece, representing the father of the Constitution, is valued at...
I think a good auction estimate of value of this seal is somewhere between $10,000 and $15,000.
Really? Wow, I would not have thought that. Wow, I'm impressed.
Next is another Harry Truman item. This Truman archive belonged to the guest father. He was the general chairman of the Truman Library auction that was held in the early 50s. This is a picture of his mother, father, Truman, and Bess at the groundbreaking ceremony.
The picture of the dignitaries at the groundbreaking ceremony that was taken at the Slower Park Shelter House, which is on the grounds of the Truman Library.
The Truman Library opened after the Presidential Libraries Act of 1955 was passed. These letters show appreciation for the work and service his dad put into the building of the library.
To build this library, they got donations from, I think, 17,000 different private individuals and groups and institutions that donated to put together a presidential library. And the reason for the library is to keep his papers for research and scholarship down the road.
Among the pile is also an amusing letter from the guest to Truman, so he ended up bringing them back home.
And it's funny because you're asking him to buy, you were offering to buy his signature, and he writes back, here is your autograph, make a good trade.
These lovely letters with the personal connection to Truman and his family are valued at about...
So altogether, I would say insurance value, you'd be looking at about $8,000.
Oh my God.
Yeah, about $8,000.
We move on to an item belonging to the 33rd President of the United States, Harry S. Truman. This President Truman 8-ball award was inherited by the guest whose great-uncle worked in the White House as an aide to Truman. When Truman left office, this award was given to the relatives as a memento. This 8-ball award was given to Truman in 1948 by the Los Angeles Press Club. When he received this award, he made a speech befitting the award, although there is no indication that Truman had this award in the White House. The best proof of his ownership is the photograph of him receiving the award from the press club. This item is valued at about $7,000 to $10,000. This is the bandana that was printed when George Washington died. The guest has owned this collection for more than 50 years. It has the eulogies of the soldiers, sailors, citizens, and all the tears of America. This bandana dates back to 1799. Carefully crafted with symbolic imagery, this bandana symbolizes patriotism and respect for the first president of the United States. It is printed in copperplate, a printing technology that originated in England. The appraiser values this timeless relic at
If this were to come up at auction, because of its rarity and extraordinary collectability, it would sell for between $6,500 and $7,000 at auction.
Wow, that is wonderful.
Next on the list is a special George Washington signed letter. This letter was bought by the guest grandfather during his stay in New York. This is a letter written by Washington to the Secretary of War, James McHenry.
The Secretary of War, not only with Washington, but with Adams.
Okay.
He was also a doctor in the Revolutionary War. Of course, one of the more famous things about McHenry.
Its contents talk about Washington welcoming McHenry to Mount Vernon.
Correct.
And when you read the letter, it says, "Dear sir, I'm going to send my carriage for you and your guests will pick you up and we'll look forward to seeing you." And essentially it refers to Mount Vernon.
It's framed together with pictures of Washington and McHenry to make it graphically more interesting. This bottom piece is of James McHenry's son giving a George Washington autographed letter to an individual.
With the George Washington, and actually all of the writing, it's dark. It's very bold. A lot of these letters tend to fade.
Having these two famous names attached to this letter significantly increases the value. It's valued at about,
I would say on a retail level, this is probably a $10,000 to $15,000 item.
Wow.
a fascinating item. This next piece is a letter containing an eyewitness experience on the 1865 President Lincoln's assassination. This letter was written by the guest grandfather, who was present at Ford's Theater the night of the assassination. The letter was written on April 21, 1865, to his uncle, describing the events of the week before, which was April 14th. The letter reveals new insights into the events that took place. According to the letter, Harper's Weekly made the mistake of not accurately describing the event. He goes on further to describe the events at the theater. Then, looking at someone in the audience, who was later proved to be an acquaintance, he utters, "I've done it." This lovely piece is valued at about,
a conservative estimate at auction would be $10,000 to $15,000.
This has been my favorite item so far. Which has been yours? Let me know in the comments. This piece represents a significant time in American history. It shows the 1864 presidential campaign flag of the then president, Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln was the 16th president of the United States.
Abraham Lincoln didn't fit, so they put Abram.
He took to the polls in 1864 for a second-term re-election, which he won against his opponent, George McClellan, by a landslide.
Lincoln was running against McClellan, who was a Civil War general, and they disliked each other intensely.
The appraiser values this flag at about $10,000 to $15,000. Whether it's a signed photo, letter, or document, each piece is a treasure. The governor of Minnesota, who was the guest father, accompanied JFK to events to raise campaign funds. Jack Kennedy's family connection is being documented satisfactorily. As a senator, he sent the guest father his book, The Strategy of Peace. These collections are a wonderful relic of a great president. Through authentication, collectors can gain insights into Kennedy's political career and personal life. The appraiser values the whole archive at,
and let's talk value a bit. The inscribed photo is worth $2,000 to $3,000 at auction. The letter as senator probably put an auction estimate on this of $1,500 to $2,000. The Strategy of Peace, I would say $1,500 to $2,000.
Well, thank you very much.
This letter has been in the Guest family for many years. It belonged to her great-great-uncle, who was the colonel of the 91st Division, stationed in Brownsville, Texas in the Civil War. This letter was written and signed by President Lincoln. It's believed to be written about an officer, David C. Edwards, who deserted during the time of war. As of the law then, he was court-martialed and meant to be shot. His fiancée went to the White House and pleaded with Lincoln to pardon him. Hence, the letter.
If David C. Edwards is in any trouble about desertion, suspend action and report the facts to me. Yours, A. Lincoln.
Along with the letter is a carte de visite 1860s-era photograph of the guest family members, some Confederate money and U.S. money, and an engraving of the Lincoln family.
I find the content of the letter extraordinary. I think it really brings to life who the man and the President, Abraham Lincoln.
This letter, with a fascinating backstory, is valued at about...
I would appraise the letter at retail value at between $10,000 to $12,000.
Oh my goodness.
Another George Washington letter makes the list. This letter was gifted by the guest's sister to their grandmother in 1980. She bought it from the antique store Charivet in Paris. This letter possibly might be an American War of Independence letter. It was written to a well-known Philadelphia family, and it mentions all the names.
And it mentions all the names. It says here, General Washington has the pleasure to inform Mrs. Powell, the recipient here, and mentions also Benjamin Harrison, who was a signer of the Declaration of Independence.
Benjamin Harrison was the signer of the Declaration of the Independence, and at the time, governor of Virginia.
And also the ancestor of 2 presidents of the United States. So it all hangs together in these few lines, and you see it's dated Saturday.
This is indeed a wonderful piece to have.
Well, the value of this, although not as enormous as some of the long Washington letters we've seen, and being in the third person...
It's valued at $8,000 to $12,000.
Oh, really?
Imagine this. Campaign rallies with people banging on drums, waving flags, and chanting slogans. In 1848, Zachary Taylor and Lewis Cass both ran for president, making it a wild political ride. This drum was used in the presidential campaign of Zachary Taylor and Lewis Cass. This drum is 155 years old, and it survived beautifully. Zachary Taylor was known as Old Rough and Ready. In that era, drums featured holes where ropes were threaded to tighten them, using leather tightened. These are the original hand-carved wooden drumsticks. The appraiser values the collection at...
If I had this drum, I think I'd want between $10,000 and $15,000 for it. No! Yes. Well, it's a wonderful thing, 155...